Hello everybody, welcome to episode number 19 of the BIVBlog, Benedict's IT video blog. My name is still Benedict Stockebrand, and today I want to talk about a rather common misconception when it comes to IPv6 that has come up again the other day, which is, okay, I know what I'm going to do about IPv6. I'll wait until I actually need it, and then I'll switch IPv6 on the mail and web servers and just run IPv4 on the backend systems forever. And this approach has quite a number of pitfalls, flaws, whatever you want to call it. And still, a lot of people actually suggest this sort of approach, and they don't realize what sort of trouble they are asking for. Now, first of all, waiting for IPv6 until you need it means you wait until you need it. What do you need it for? To make a living. So basically, you wait until you realize you're losing money. And by the time you start to lose money, you start to lose money. So that in itself is rather dangerous. You can sort of play it like that if you are working in an environment, or if your IT is set up such a way that they can quickly deal with this sort of situation. But if they're set up like that, they've already taken care of IPv6 anyway, and you haven't even noticed. As a general rule of thumb, at least. And this sort of wait until it hurts is very human. Most people only go to the dentist when they can't stand the pain any longer. Nothing very unusual about that, but that doesn't mean it's a very clever thing to do. Not with a dentist, not with IPv6. But that's a general thing. The other thing that I want to talk about today is more specifically this attitude: we'll make the mail service and web service and whatever is accessible from the outside IPv6 capable, and keep running IPv4 in the backend systems. And there's a whole range of flaws in this approach. As a short-term solution, it kind of works if you're willing to take a number of risks and spend a significant amount of money and so on, but it's not really the one thing you want to do. So first of all, it's not just the mail and web servers. If you turn on IPv6 on your mail and web servers, for your external business partners, customers, whatever, to reach you, they can't reach you because you have to support IPv6 on the way to them. So you have to check out your network setup on the network components, your routers, switches, whatever. Not just the mail and web servers. You have to do a bit more, which is kind of obvious, but means all of a sudden a number of other people have to be brought into the game. That might be a bit of a surprise if you don't think about that beforehand. And then you might find out that, okay, we have to replace so and so and so hardware, network hardware, routers, possibly even switches if you're really unlucky, because they don't support IPv6. Switches generally shouldn't be a problem, but if their managed switches have layer 3 functionality and so on, even they might be affected. And then there's something that's neither web server nor network component, called a load balancer. And these things are bitchy and they're expensive, and they're sort of neither the server people nor the network people generally like to touch them, because they have to deal with the other departments or teams competence thing. That's if you have a server team and a network team. Load balancers are somewhere in between, and there's always this political dimension to it that whoever takes care of them has to sort of deal with some sort of thing the others are responsible for, really, and touchy topic sometimes. So you want to be careful about those. And even then, so you got all your network stuff IPv6 capable, still people can't reach you because you still need IPv6 connectivity to the internet. And that introduces the game, or introduces the players, your ISP, your uplink provider, whatever. And you might find out they tell you, and this still happens today, yeah, sure, we have IPv6. Okay, we need further. Oh, but you're a business customer. No, not for business. We only do this for our consumer grade access. And this actually happens today, as of March 2014, at least here in Germany. And then you have a problem. And you've actually been lucky, because it could have been worse. Well, if you're really lucky, your ISP tells you, okay, here's IPv6 and it works. There's some who do that, and increasingly more. Some will tell you, go away, you don't need that. We know, we are the network people, we know you don't need that sort of stuff. And the worst thing that can happen to you is that your ISP tells you, yes, sure sir, ma'am, no problem, we'll do it. And they do IPv6 even more than half the time. And by the time you figured out they simply can't cope with IPv6 properly, you've lost a lot of time and a lot of money, and there'll be lots of stress and lots of trouble. So those are things that can go wrong. And actually, generally speaking, they're the harmless ones. What can be worse is the complications on the, let's just talk about mail and web service, because that's what you usually hear. Mail servers aren't just mail servers. Running a mail server is fairly simple and straightforward, but there are things like performance issues you want to be aware of, and that can be fun. There are things like spam filters. A couple years ago, a lot of people got into a lot of trouble with the IPv6 with the spam filters, because what happens when an email is transported from one mail server to another, then every mail server on the way puts a received header in there, which says, I've received this mail from so and so, going there and there. And what happened was that some spam filters looked at these received headers and saw something there that didn't belong there, because it was not a valid IP address. Because they didn't know about IPv6, only IPv4, and IPv6 addresses are not valid IPv4 addresses. And dropped this obvious spam. And a lot of people had a lot of trouble explaining to their management and their customers and business partners and so on that certain mails simply didn't make it through the spam filter. Has happened a couple years ago, and there's still a good chance that you might actually be using a spam filter that still has this sort of problem. And if there's one thing you don't want to do is figure this out in time pressure when you're already losing business and you do things right away on production systems. Yeah, but if you work in IT, and if you have been working on real world systems, you know that every once in a while you might wind up in a situation that you have to do something on a production system where you rather would have spent a couple more weeks testing things first, but there's a management decision, we need this right away, do it. We assume responsibility. And if you're unlucky, they assume responsibility for it if it works and blame you if it doesn't. But that's a different story. Anyway, spam filters are one of the smaller problems in the mail system in general. There are some things when it comes to embedded HTML which are similar to the problems we have with web servers, however. And the first thing is that every once in a while web designers come up with the idea that for performance reasons it is better to put IP addresses in their web pages rather than DNS names. I admit about 15, 16, 17 years ago, I've been doing this myself, because at that time it actually made a performance difference in the particular situation. But these days web browsers should cache DNS lookups, so it doesn't make that much of a difference, but some people simply don't believe it, and they make it a belief because they don't understand the technical aspects behind it anyway. And when that happens, you have to deal with the web content, not just the web service that dish out whatever content, but actually you have to update the content. And that's where things are getting ugly. You suddenly have to deal with the web designer, content people. You might have to deal with some sort of content management system that is responsible for doing this sort of stuff. And that's where things get really ugly. You might have some sort of backend system like an enterprise resource planning or ERP system that actually generates some sort of content that is then passed through the web server to your customers. For example, if you have a web shop or something like that. And that's where things start to get really entertaining. Another problem that can be rather important to some people is that they don't just use a web server to provide whatever content, but they actually take a look at IP addresses, usually for geolocation purposes. There are a number of reasons why you want to know where you're being connected from, or your web server is being connected from. Simple most is you want that for whatever statistics purposes. So you lose the statistics. Who cares? Except management and marketing and so on, and they'll be barking mad, but at least the web server is running. Things do get worse if you have a website that is financed through advertisement. Because if your business model is to provide location-based advertisements, you have a problem. If you can't tell your customer is in Berlin or Rio de Janeiro or Tokyo or Brisbane, you can't send suitable advertisements. It can be quite a problem if you're in this sort of business. Yet another problem is if you're in some sort of business where there are legal restrictions depending on the country you're in. Lottery games, naughty stuff, weapons of mass destruction like strong crypto, which is considered a, well, military grade weaponry, at least in some obscure countries like the United States of America, where they're still regulated by the International Trades in Arms and Ammunitions Regulation, ITAR. So you want to be very careful there, because if you can't tell that somebody is connecting to your website from North Korea, you might actually get into some serious legal problems. And no, that is not limited to the US only. There are a couple other countries with similar situations. It might even be very, very, very mundane that you want to get the right value-added tax rates for your customer and the country they connect from. So that's where things can get really, really fun. It's simply not like open an IPv6 socket on your mail server and web server and be done with it. It's just not that easy. And even then, these problems can be sorted out. It'll take time, and you'll use money during that time if you really wait until you have to have IPv6 up and running. But things that can happen, and I've seen these happen both with IPv6 and significantly worse in another couple other contexts, is what happens to your IT people. If you decide we wait until we need IPv6 and then we deploy it on the main web servers. It basically means that your IT people like me, except that I have been doing this for more than 10 years now, will first learn how to run and operate and set up IPv6 under time pressure on production systems which are absolutely essential to your business, and show all your business partners, customers and whoever that you can't cope with it. Puts up an enormous pressure on your people, and when that happens you stress them out. Good chances there are people who decide, I've been feeling a bit uncomfortable here anyway, I'm gonna look for greener pastures, new job, and normally you lose the people you can't afford to lose. So that is a huge problem, and they will screw up. I mean, if you have to learn something completely new, which is kind of like something you've done before but is different in a significant number of ways, you will screw up. First time you go to a country where people drive on the wrong side of the road and try to drive a car, you will screw up. And if you do that on a bicycle or motorcycle where you're not reminded about the situation by sitting on the wrong side of the car all the time, the situation is even worse. And yes, I talk from experience here, especially when it comes to bicycles. So people will need to learn, and they shouldn't really learn this on a production system under time pressure. Simple as that. However, because they have to in this situation, and there is lots of management attention involved, there's a good chance that there's a huge amount of blame game involved. Something goes wrong, and then the network people tell it's the server people tell it's network people, then the security people, and so on and so forth. And every time this happens, because people simply don't know how else to cope with the situation, it has a significant impact on the operations of your IT teams or the IT department or whatever as a whole, because it creates lots of tension, lots of bad blood between groups and people. And yes, I've seen this. The first thing sort of going like this was when somebody dared to introduce then brand new Linux into a proper Unix environment. That was 20 years ago, so that was next to a civil war going on there. And that's something you want to avoid. Approaching this web and mail server first thing or using this approach will lead to these sorts of problems, and they can be really, really painful. And once you or management realizes, okay, our internal people simply can't cope with the situation, so what do? Don't have much of a choice. You're bringing the external specialists. And you might be lucky, get somebody who knows what he or she is doing. Me, for example. But there's a good chance you bring somebody in who has 30 years of experience with IPv6, according to his or her resume, but doesn't know a thing about it because they're just bloody lying. And this happens, yes, it actually does. And when these people enter the game and you have nobody who can check them out, either because nobody in your IT department has the necessary background, or because management doesn't trust their own internal people any longer, because well, they've got this fancy, expensive, very expensive sorry, I forgot something, external specialist who says our internal people don't know about this, you trust them, or your management trusts them, and then things might actually go seriously wrong. Yes, been there, done that, got the gray hair. It's very, very ugly. I know I've seen that not from the external contractor side, but from the regular employees side. No fun at all. Trust me on that. And you only find out that there's a problem when it really hurts. So you want to avoid that. So what you might want to do is, okay, let's just outsource this stupid IT stuff. We don't like it anyway. Makes you even more dependent on that. And a couple of years ago, I've had a training where this really showed how it could happen. I'm not kidding you. This is really what happened to me, pretty much exactly like this. I got a phone call Tuesday afternoon from a training operator I've been working with. Benedict, we just got a phone call from a company who isn't even our customers, or hasn't been our customer so far, but they said they need an IPv6 one-day training as soon as humanly possible. Tuesday afternoon. Said, okay, it's Thursday, Friday, or 2.5 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, because the 2 weeks in between I'll be on the road. Benedict, that's very short notice. Are you sure you can't do anything in those 2? Sorry, but I'm booked for those 2 weeks. Okay, but what should I do? Well, call the customer and tell them so, and let them decide. Okay. That was late Tuesday afternoon. Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock, they had a habit of never calling a trainer before 10 o'clock for whatever reasons. My phone rings. Benedict, pack your gear. You have to go there and there, halfway across Germany, by the way. And they said rather Thursday than Friday. So I spent the whole Wednesday packing up my gear, getting a couple handouts printed, getting a hotel booking, got on the train, went there, arrived there shortly before midnight, got to sleep in the hotel. Next morning, went to the customer, and first thing was that their general attitude was something like, okay, we know that we have to, but don't believe that we want to. It's not as if we didn't have enough to do anyway. Generally speaking, they were very fair to me, but their attitude towards IPv6 was pretty obvious. First coffee break, I found out what happened. By the way, they were sort of a data center operator, contractor sort of company, and a pretty reputable one. What had happened, a week and a half ago, one of their key account managers had a meeting with one of their big customers, and the customer asked, what about IPv6? Sure, no problem. Okay, we need a price. What exactly do you need? Well, IPv6 with everything, fixed rate. And the key account manager took another week before he showed up. The technical team said, I don't even know what this is, but they need a quote by, and that's the point, Friday. So the reason why they wanted this training on Thursday rather than Friday is because Friday they had to prepare the quote or tender or whatever. And that was a fairly reputable contractor. They had good people, that was good. And you don't even have that all the time, but they actually had to come up with a quote. They had to do the pricing after 1 day of training, and afterwards they'd have to set up and run IPv6 with still 1 day of training. And if I was a customer of these and I'd find out about this, I'd be really worried. So these things happen. And it's not just one of those ultra cheap, yes, we can do everything sort of companies. They were actually fairly reputable. But these things happen. So outsourcing, blindly outsourcing, is not really an option. Outsourcing can be useful in a number of ways. If things are very specialized and you want specialists to take care of things, but you want to be able to keep an eye on them. And if you don't even have the skills and the manpower to do that, you're just asking to be held ransom and been ripped off big time without even realizing. And even those problems aren't that bad. What's still worse is, or maybe still worse, is if you're in this sort of environment where you come up with this idea of waiting until it hurts and then take care of where it hurts most, is that if you do this, you might wind up in a situation where you can't sort things out properly. If you have this sort of burst budgeting, where management realizes, okay, we've got a problem there because we can see on the business numbers, so we throw money on there until the problem becomes unnoticeable from a management perspective, and then shut down all budgeting, so people in whatever department just have barely enough resources to keep things running somehow. Then you have a problem. That leads to the situation we have in a number of banks and engineering bureaus, where people are still using SNA between mainframes or IPX netware on their PCs, DOS PCs in some cases, because nobody ever got a chance to moving these things to anything else. This happens, small scale, big scale. And if you just follow this approach in this sort of environment, you will have mail access, web access from the outside via IPv6, and you might get mail access and web access to the outside via IPv6 somehow. But you'll never actually get to a point where you can get rid of IPv4, which is basically the goal of deploying IPv6, or should be the goal. And as such, your IT will always be more expensive than it should be. And that is a long-term problem, especially so if the next thing that happens is that your chairman of the board shows up, hey, we get this new iPhone whatever, and blah blah blah, whatever new feature doesn't work. Yes, because it needs IPv6 on our side. Yeah, then make it work. Yes, you can deploy IPv6 that way wherever there's some immediate need, but doing a proper structured approach is more sensible. Anyway, this isn't always possible, sometimes because the way your company works, sometimes because there is a real shortage of budget or whatever. Doesn't matter. And in that case, what can you do to keep this problem reasonably under control? There's effectively two things to keep aware. First, if you follow this approach, you will start away in a crisis mode project. So things have to be done by yesterday. Yes, there will be budget, but you won't have any time, and it'll be very critical. There'll be problems, things will go wrong. You'll have lots of management attention, which is good because you get budget, but which is bad because you can't get work done. And if you want to keep this situation under control, at least to some degree, there's two things you can do and you should do. First, make sure you realize as quickly as possible that there's something going wrong, no matter how. And this actually can be done at the business side. If you see your sales go down, then you know there's something wrong. if you don't keep a close eye on your numbers, you don't realize that there's something wrong, and you continue to lose money without even noticing. And the second, of course, is at least be aware of IPv6 as a potential cause for these problems. And this is something you really, really should do. If you don't even do that, sorry, but you don't deserve any better. And yes, that's a bit disappointing, and I've been very lucky for the last almost 10 years that the vast majority of my customers were the sort of, we know about this IPv6, it's there, but we don't know what it is and how to deal with this, and they paid me for that, made a living out of it. But right now things are tipping over, and there are more people who show up as customers. We have a problem here, and my guess is for the rest of this year it'll increase quite significantly. I'm probably going to do more of these crisis projects than this year than I've done the last 10 years together. So much about mail and web servers first. I hope you found this kind of helpful, despite the fact that this is not really an all exciting, beautiful, exciting new technology sort of stuff, but a bit of a kind of grim outlook really. But well, life isn't always nice. If you like this and you want to do me a favor, give it a thumbs up on YouTube. If you have questions, if you want to discuss, if you think this is complete and utter nonsense and that's the only way to do it and everything else is stupid, whatever, come over to the forum. URL is on the closing slide. And no matter what, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you soon. Bye.